announcement. If you are a ladle and you previously attended this training in January of 2018, you cannot claim credit again, just FYI. And hopefully everybody signed in on the sheets up front with your respective organization, grabbed a handout, a self-care continuum card, and an evaluation. And with no further ado, we have Professor Brittany Stringfellow, Otey, I always forget, here today to talk to us about burnout and self-care.
All right, welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for spending your lunch with me. I'm a professor at Pepperdine Law School, and before you imagine like the ocean and sunsets, etc., I am located on Skid Row at the Union Rescue Mission. So we run a legal aid clinic. I do get to go there once a week and sort of see how the other half lives, or the 1%, I don't know who lives there. Anyway, I don't. And so I do go up there to teach, but the majority of my work takes place at the Union Rescue Mission, and I've been volunteering or working there since 1998. So what I have to share with you today actually comes from a really deep place in that I feel very called to my work. We provide civil legal aid to folks who are experiencing homelessness in all of the shelters in that area, so a lot of overlap on our clientele, I'm imagining. But there are a lot of days where I can't figure out how I'm going to go to work tomorrow. So several years ago I started thinking maybe I need to find out what the best practices are in all of this, because I don't know about you, but I didn't learn anything about taking care of myself in law school. I actually learned that like all the bad habits are how you survive, and I don't find that they are long-term, they're helpful in the long term. So as a professor, I started feeling like I really have a duty. If I'm going to bring students to work with me on Skid Row, I need to prepare them, I need to teach them about how to have a life that they'll actually like. And I also, if I want to be here, if I want to be an advocate who understands the nuances of poverty and Skid Row and all the things, the politics and all the stuff, and have a lifelong career there, I also need to be engaged, because I don't think my clients deserve someone who's checked out. So the minute I'm not, I got to get out of there. So I've been trying to figure out for about the past 10 years how to do that. And I don't come with all the answers, I just come with things I've found in my research, and so not at all. And I guess I've written on it, so it's an expert, but I don't feel like I've conquered it, I guess. So I just want to sort of join you in the journey. As another aside, the last time I was here it was with my husband as we were foster parents. And so being in this building, my empathy just flows for all of you and for everyone in this building. So I just want you to have some context about where this all comes from. I want us to start by thinking back to law school. A couple of questions. What kinds of things did you want your future colleagues and clients to say about you? And you can just pop it, it's like law school, right? So like, what kinds of things did you want to be known of you? Anything?
Compassionate.
Compassionate? What else? Competent? Zealous? When you imagined your work-life balance, what kinds of things did you hope for? And maybe you were hoping against all hopes, but what kinds of things did you sort of want your life to look like?
Healthy balance.
A healthy balance? Yeah.
Enough time to raise and have kids.
Family? Yeah. Anything else? Come to mind?
Vacation time?
Vacation. And then what did you want your daily and weekly rhythms to look like? Did you have any vision of that when you were in law school or your early years in practice? Did you want to exercise? Did you want to eat good foods that are good for your body?
You wanted to make sure that you made a difference in the time that you were spending at your work. If not, going to find something else that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time.
Yeah, so like a valuable time at work. That's great. So thinking back to law school and then thinking of today, how are those things matching up? Like no problem, it's all balanced. You get like some gold star at the gym because you're there so often, you're so on it. I mean, that's the thing, right? So when I'm talking to law students, a lot of this is about making plans for the kind of life you want. And then when you're in mid-career like me, then I'm thinking, okay, well, am I doing this the way am I living the life? Because the thing for me is that law school is expensive. I made a pretty big investment on a life that I would like to like, right? It doesn't seem worthwhile to not. The trick about this, though, is I think it's really important to be honest about the lack of well-being in our profession. So this is where I'm just Debbie Downer, womp womp, so sad. But let's talk about it. We lead other professions in a whole lot of really horrible things. Depression, alcoholism, substance abuse, and career dissatisfaction. I do not understand for such a competitive group of people that we are so okay with our investment returning like this. I don't get that about us. And so it's not like these things are just popping up when we start our career. They're actually really quite present in law school. So we're seeing a lot of alcohol use in law schools. This study's from 2014, but it's the last time that they did a comprehensive study. Those who are willing to admit that they're using prescribed drugs that are not actually prescribed to them are sharing that that's an increased amount once they get into law school. And then when we look at mental health, we've got a lot of anxiety. We've got a lot of depression and a lot of eating disorders. So these things are all present. And they're showing up again in the profession. When you look at this 2016 study, 21 to 36% problem drinkers. In mental health, we've got almost 30% with depression, 20% with anxiety. And you're seeing a lot of this in early career, and then you're also, this maybe makes us feel better, a lot of it's also in big firms. So we didn't go that way. And so I think it's worthwhile to have a conversation about the occupational hazards of our profession. Like I said, I heard nothing about this. I worked in the clinic that I now run, and I learned nothing about how to take care of myself while I was in law school. It's like I had to make it up. So I don't think these conversations are happening enough, and I know they're not happening enough because everywhere I go around the country, people are like, oh yeah. You know, it's like the first time or early on when they're hearing these things. So here's our occupational hazards of our profession. We don't dress like that, and I can't tell you how hard it was to try to find a construction picture where the woman was not subservient. So these are teammates here that are working. That was a hard one photo. Okay, so primary occupational hazards. First one's stress. We all know you just enter law school. I mean, you're just like a person who probably thrives on stress if you're even willing to go to law school, right? So in that setting, you know that stress is a thing. The trick about stress, though, is it can be really a good thing when your body sort of just is called to attention. Your synapses are firing, you're breathing hard, you know, your heart's beating, that blood is pumping, you're ready to go right before you do your first appellate, you know, whatever. And so all of that stuff, you remember that, and that's also part of your daily life here. But the trick is, if you think about like weight training or something, even if you think of it in terms of a muscle, you're not supposed to be under stress at all times. You're supposed to stress the muscle and then relax the muscle. And so the problem in our profession is that the stress rarely stops. And we'll talk more about why that is. In the longer term, when you've got long-term stress, you end up leaning toward burnout. This is exhaustion and or cynicism. Anybody ever exposed to any cynicism? Associated with prolonged exposure to emotionally demanding situations. So you're just like, where's the t-shirt? This is our lives, right? And so, and you know that all the studies show this comes up more when maybe there's not enough resources, where money's tight, where you're having to make difficult decisions because you just don't have the emotional or the financial resources to actually solve the problems in front of you. So again, that we're really susceptible to burnout. And then the next one that people don't always remember to talk about is vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue, depending on which article you read, but it's all the same thing. This encompasses the burnout and the secondary trauma associated with those in the helping profession who encounter clients who have undergone trauma. So we really started this conversation on vicarious trauma after 9/11. They realized, man, all these firefighters are really struggling after having responded. All the first responders are really having all of these PTSD types of effects after, and they're not the ones that, you know, were the initial trauma. So they start studying it, and it takes a whole lot longer to get over to lawyers, right? So we just stay in first responders for decades, and then people start thinking, there's other people that are exposed to trauma. So you move into nurses, psychotherapists, teachers, social workers, mental health workers, and then judges and lawyers. This all stems from empathy. So empathy is the thing that probably makes you really good at your job. It's also the thing that really makes your job hard on you. The definition of how this all sort of works is that the neurons in our mind mirror, the mirror neurons. They innately identify with the pain of others, and our brains maintain the information and respond through several paths: hearing the story, seeing the images, and identifying with the emotions. And so what you end up with, and Charles Figley is a big name in vicarious trauma. Essentially, this is a disorder that affects those who do their jobs well. The hard part about this is that the very thing that makes us great, that we can identify with the pain and the trauma of our client and communicate that story and advocate for them on their behalf, actually affects us. And the trick about lawyers is that we tend, and there's lots of studies on figuring out why we are maybe even more susceptible to this, and a lot of times because we think we're just very logical. We're just here to do a job. And so we're not maybe as well versed in the emotional impact of our job, and so we can actually get hit kind of from the side when if we're not coming in it and paying attention. And what happens with vicarious trauma is you end up, the secondhand results are negative changes in assumptions about life, other people, and safety. So my question, maybe you want to answer, is how has your work affected your worldview? I'll start. My kids are never going on a sleepover. Right? I'm not able to kind of separate that my lovely neighbors are not the stories I've heard, right? So what kinds of things? Is it positively affect your worldview? Is it negatively? Are you more aware of the dangers in the world? What kinds of things come from working in this lovely building?
If I turn 2 corners and there's a car behind me that appears to be following me,
Yep.
I go the wrong way.
Totally. Totally. I went the craziest ways from every visit when I was a foster parent. Like it took me 25 minutes to go 2 minutes home because I was all over the city. Yeah. What else?
I don't trust men and little girls.
Yeah. Yeah, the concept of Manny, just like, what are you talking about, right? Like, that's cute, but no. Yeah.
I mean, I find myself judging parents more like, this person maybe DCFS get involved.
Yeah. Yeah, because you just know how bad it could go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're exposed to really difficult truth. Anything else? I get totally I can't watch the same TV shows I used to watch. I can't shake them. I can't go see a movie that has some sort of too truthful kind of scary thing. I'm like, I don't want to know any more about how bad the world is. I have a hard time with the news. There are things I want to be up on, but it's just I can't take one more sad thing. And so I actually end up being a little bit, not aloof, but just sort of like I can't go there with that. I don't know if anybody else experiences that. You end up feeling like there's no justice in the world, that there's danger everywhere. And in fact, by bearing the suffering of others and being witness to it, you end up with less capacity to bear that suffering. So a couple of interesting studies. It took us a while, until 2006 are there many studies within our profession on vicarious trauma. But the first one in 2006 found that judges are unequivocally affected by the trauma that they just hear day in and day out. And you think about it with judges, they also have fewer places to process that. Because they don't have they're not on a team or whatever. And so that happens. I think also there's an interesting study actually out of Israel from 2011 where they tracked parole hearings and whether you got more parole granted before lunch or after. And they found that right after lunch was really the sweet spot. So this says to me, if hunger and just being a little bit, uncomfortable has that much of an effect, then probably day in and day out of stress and burnout is going to have an effect. In 2011, maybe you remember, this used to be so recent and it's really not anymore. There's a study on the Wisconsin public defenders, and they found PTSD, anxiety, and stress in alarming numbers in that department. Sad thing is, I keep checking, they really did nothing after that. It's just like, yep, it's bad. But what I'm troubled by is that just by being a public defender, you have the same side effects as if you've gone to war. So there's something happening in our work that is we need to name and we need to do something about because it's having some pretty significant effects. And they're saying that it came from heavy caseloads, exposure to trauma, and symptoms of vicarious trauma. So the side effects of this burnout and vicarious trauma are, just make you an amazing employee. Fatigue, exhaustion, absenteeism, job turnover. It's like, you get that cold that you just sort of can't get over because you're burnt out. Your body just can't get better. Your productivity is low. You don't like being there. You're probably not that fun to be around. You're not as committed to your job. You also end up with impaired judgment when you're burnt out. So just, quick snap decisions that you're making all the time, they're just not as good as if you were well rested and feeling good and that kind of thing. What else? Low motivation. And then because you're worn down, you're just susceptible to negative coping behaviors and addictions. So that's why we see so much of that in our professions. People are burnt out and they sort of just turn to something that will help quickly. And so many of those addictions are really the reasons why people get disbarred and disciplined. And it usually has some sort of addiction or depression element to it. So, the ABA National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing came out maybe like a year ago. They finally decided to take a look at this, and they came up with the reasons to take action. The first is organizational success. Organizations just run better if everybody's feeling better, right? If you've got 50% of when they did a study on legal aid, all the legal aid lawyers, within 3 to 5 years, they're planning their exit. Well, if you're constantly dealing with turnover and you're constantly retraining and you constantly have a new attorney on the job, it's just not efficient, right? So it makes sense to do. It's also expensive to keep training. Another reason to take note of this is ethics and professionalism. 40 to 70% of the disciplinary actions involve substance abuse or depression or both. We're looking at impaired executive functioning, diminished memory, attention and problem solving, inability to evaluate risks, prioritize, cope with unexpected situations. It just doesn't make you a great professional if you're burnt out. This is my favorite one. It's just the right thing to do, right? We should just take care of ourselves and each other because it's the right thing to do. I don't want you to have a life you hate. I hope you don't want me to have a life I hate. I feel good about that. And so it's just we should take care of each other. We should pay attention to this. And then the one that gets me probably the most is that I think this is an access to justice issue. When I think of the clients who don't have the money to go to someone other than me, I just think that they have a high rate of folks who are burnt out to turn to. And you see that all over the place, and I'm constantly defending all my friends who have gone into different industries in the law, who clients don't trust and that kind of thing, but I just think that it is true. There's a whole lot of people burn out in different agencies, and the clients are experiencing that. So I do think this is a matter of professional responsibility as well. The model rule for client-lawyer relationships says a lawyer shall provide competent representation to a client. And it's easy for us to say competency, I know the law. I've been in this for a while. I know the ins and outs of the law. But competency actually includes the mental, emotional, and physical ability that is reasonably necessary for the performance of such service. So we start to get into a little bit a deeper place if we need to be competent in that way. Competence presumes a lack of impairment. That means sufficient sleep. It means substance-free. It means not overcome by negative thoughts and feelings, and it means the ability to maintain proper boundaries. We don't end up I don't have a ton of places in my life where I am particularly vulnerable. I can usually figure things out. I can usually find out who's the best at something and figure out a way to pay to have them help me with it or whatever. Because we are in a particular privilege level, we just sort of don't spend a ton of time feeling vulnerable. I'm speaking very blanketly, sorry. But I'll tell you, a few years ago, my nephew needed open heart surgery at 4 months. And for the first time, I was like, I don't know about medicine. There's actually this whole world of things that feel very overwhelming to me. And so when I saw the surgeon come, he was walking through the lobby to go do the surgery, I remember distinctly thinking, oh my goodness, I hope he had a good night's sleep. I hope he's not using like some energy drink to get through the next 10 hours. I hope he doesn't use anything. I hope he didn't have a fight with his spouse this morning. You know, like I need him to be on the ball. And that really was a moment where I thought, oh, I feel so vulnerable and I need him to be at his best. And yet all the time, my clients are in that same position and need me to show up and to really be on my game. And so this idea of competence really is, we really got to take into consideration who we are when we show up at work. This is all made worse, or it's kind of worse, by technology. Technology has so many upsides. I work between Pepperdine and home and the Union Rescue Mission, and I can do it all because everything is on my phone. I just adore Google Docs. Like everything, you know, it's just all there. So great. Social media also has a positive because it allows us to stay in connection with people that we wouldn't be near, and like all of those types of things. However, the downside, in particular, this is particularly true for digital natives, technology sort of eliminates that boundary between work and personal life. So when I started practicing law, I actually put things in a filing cabinet and locked it and went home, which makes me sound like I'm from the 1800s. But it didn't even occur to me to like carry things with me at all times. It wouldn't be prudent, you know, like I don't want to lose anything from the file, whatever. Now, if I don't choose to make some sort of boundary, I can open up a file while I'm at my kid's soccer game. I can do it on a date. I can ruin anything at my house by bringing my work, and especially traumatic work, right into my sacred space. And so we got to be really careful about the ways that we use technology and make sure they're helping us and not just creating a huge cesspool of stress, right? And the same with social media. You've got all sorts of ethical challenges, right? This is not where you want to be venting about work and about the, you know, the trials that you're experiencing in your life. If you read the cases on this where people are getting it so wrong, I mean, it's really amazing. Have you read I don't know if you've read the ones, but this lawyer who like wrote a song to Gilligan's Island about how bad his judge was and put it on Facebook and it went viral, and these are the types of things that happen, right? So one of the things that we're really doing a lot of training with our students is just keeping that boundary really, really carefully delineated. So that's a bunch of bad news. You're welcome. How's your lunch feeling? So my bigger question is, all right, these are all true, and this is where we work. And for a variety of reasons, this is where we want to work. We want to be in this space and be zealous advocates for folks who need it. So then my question becomes, how do we build resiliency in the face of this? Because I want to like my life. I want to feel present with my children. I want them not to resent that I was always at Skid Row. You know, like all those types of things are the things that I sort of process through. And so how do I also, in the midst of working in a real high-need space, how do I also have a life that I feel like it is flourishing? So I started looking at other disciplines for wisdom on this, because the law is not the place to look. We have not done a good job. So I looked at medicine, social work, and psychology. And while the end results of all of these types of things, not that every doctor's got it together and they're so much better than lawyers, whatever, not at all. But at least these things are discussed. And so how could we take that and how could we improve upon it? So the first thing that I've learned is that we need to become really wise and understand the issues that are underlying the kinds of stress and burnout and virtual compassion fatigue. And that is they call it psychoeducation. This is understanding what's going underneath the surface. So when I'm really burning out and I notice that I'm becoming cynical, I need to be educated about that so that that doesn't just become my way of life. Instead, it's a little bit of a catch, and then I turn things around. Or if I've got a client that's over-connected to me and sort of things are not psychologically appropriate between us, I need to know what that is and put it into it and change my boundaries and that kind of thing. So it's about sort of getting to know what are these issues and what kinds of things do we need to do to sort of combat it. And then the other piece of that is we need to create a plan for self-care and we need to execute it. Because the fact is that the field that we've chosen to go into just has some shrapnel. And we've got to be ready to sort of be not only preemptive but also reactive when we see things coming up. Got this great quote by Professor Gino Peters, who's been her writing's been a real mentor to me over the years. And I think it sums up the need for us to do these things. It says, as we work harder and harder, fueled by concern for our clients, our universe will start to shrink, almost imperceptibly, but remarkably swiftly to our work. We learn of all the intricacies of those things that we fight against. For instance, the death penalty opponent knows all the methods of death by legal injection or the electrical chair. Child protection advocates know about the different ways that caretakers can maltreat children. Human rights advocates deal daily in the details of torture and know each form by their indigenous names. We can too easily forget that the world is larger than our crusades and that despite all odds, beauty and hope still flourish in the world. So that's what I'm trying to get at, is how do we protect ourselves so that we can be very cognizant of the fact that beauty and hope still flourish in the world. So the first is that psychoeducation. The second that people come up with is really social support. And a lot of this has to do with maintaining friendships and supportive communities, not only at work, but I also really encourage us to make sure that the people who loved us before we were in this world, that we keep them along. And a lot of times when you get into really intensive work, it's easy to sort of let people kind of drop off, right? Mm-hmm. And especially you see that in law school. Your law school friends become your world, and you're like, oh yeah, I really got to call my mom, you know, or whatever. And so when you get into an intensive situation, and these are your comrades in this space, you just want to really make sure that, you know, your friend who's a dog walker is still in your life, and that you can just, people that know the intricacies of your work, and then people who don't, so that you can have another kind of space to be in. And then the final component of this is organizational support. This one's tricky because I don't know how many of you have power to change the way things are done in your workspace. So I'm going to give you some ideas that I've learned from the ABA and from other, but I encourage you to link arms and try to think about ways that you might change, even in small ways, your space, your work area, or not work area, but your environment. So things that seem to work are a diversified caseload, time off, which we talked about that at the beginning. And then this idea of periodization. Periodization comes from, there's a sports trainer who does a lot of work with Fortune 100 companies. And what they've realized is it's back to that idea of the muscle, right? So you can't stress a muscle all the time and expect it to get stronger. And so when they looked at like Olympic athletes, you don't just have them like run indefinitely until the Olympics, right? There's running, there's stretching, there's rest, all these types of pieces. And so the idea is that in the work week or world, 15 weeks of really stressful work needs to be followed by both celebration and rest. Which is such an interesting way to even, I mean, it's funny to have like Fortune 100 people talking about like, we should have a celebration. That seems very like my mom or something. I don't know. But this idea that like you need to plan out, and maybe that's the way you look at your calendar or something, or maybe that's the way you talk about it within your whole division. But some sort of periodization where there's, you really push, and then you celebrate that you've pushed, and you take some sort of rest or reprieve and get going again. So I don't know how these things work in your real life, and I don't know that we can make the legal profession just totally buy into all of it. But I do think that there are small tweaks, and I've had great conversations with Jessica about how do we sort of just have, even in small places in small ways, where we put this rest and celebration. And then also, the ABA talks about establishing a well-being committee, and then assessing your stress and burnout, and aligning incentives toward those types of things, toward well-being. So again, this is something that has to be done really by management, obviously. But also, I just think that I've seen people say, you know what, my organization doesn't get it, but I'm starting a walking club on Mondays. And I enjoy being outside the building with people that are like-minded, and that has changed my week. So I know that there are big ways to do this, and then I think there are small ways where you can just sort of preserve your sanity. And a way to assess your stress and burnout is this little card that I've given you. And this is, I actually learned this at a conference in this building probably 10 years ago. So, the Green. Green is when life is going great. What does green look like for you? What are some of the things you're doing or some markers in your life that green works? So turn to the person next to you and just for 2 minutes or whatever, what does green look like in your life when it's going great?
I'm like, what else is probably more towards this.
It's a good sign if you laugh green. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, what did you guys hear? What are some of the green things? What does life look like when you're thriving?
Vacation.
Vacation?
Balance.
Balance. What does that mean?
The work-life balance, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you know, not always focusing on, like, solely on work, being able to focus on other things.
Mm-hmm. What else? What kinds of things do you do when you're in the green?
Sticking to a routine, whether it be exercising or cooking dinner every night for myself instead of eating out.
Mm-hmm. What else? You had so much to say. I was like, this is great. You want a group that knows what green looks like, because sometimes it gets away from me. I read more when I'm in the green. When I'm not in green, I scroll. Very different. Books are better than Facebook, turns out. I mean, what else?
Hobbies.
Say again?
Healthy relationships.
Healthy relationships. Time for people. Yeah. Hobbies.
Hobbies.
Who has a hobby? Awesome. I just recently realized I need to think of something. Both just, I mean, the studies really define, like if you're in a real help profession, they want you to always be learning something new because it forces you to not think about the things that are hard. So I've been like, I need to learn how to watercolor. I am a terrible watercolorer, but I'm going to figure it out. What else? The one I always share is when I'm in the green, I put lotion on my feet. I just know that I'm really like moving slowly through my bedtime routine if I put lotion on my feet. That's just a nice, weird thing. Anything else?
Beach.
Go to the beach. Nice. All right. Yellow. Yellow is not bad, but it ain't good. So you're kind of moving into a more stressed situation. So a couple minutes with each other. What does yellow look for you? What are your indicators in your life for yellow?
I know. Well, right now, like
Okay. What kinds of things are yellow? What starts happening in the yellow?
Need space,
Need space? That's good. What else?
irritable.
Irritable.
Less sleep.
Less sleep. Either by just staying up late or also just the insomnia in the middle, huh? That's- yeah. What else? Less exercise probably. More drive-through.
dishes and laundry start to pile
Oh
up.
yeah. You can tell. You can look at my car and decide what kind of week I'm in. Oh, do you live here? What's going on? What else? I have 4 kids, so I usually blame it on them, but it isn't them. What else? Anybody else get a little eye twitch? That often is leading into red for me, but that's when I'm like, whoa, something's off. I think I had it like most of law school, but you know, whatever. Anything else? All right. Red. So red is described as those kind of in a moment where a bubble bath's just not going to fix it. Like it's just sort of beyond the you know, the self-care, like a pedicure or a run or whatever. Those types of things are just not going to do it. So another couple minutes. What does red look like?
No groceries, none of that. Like, what are we gonna get? Order you won't know when you I would do funny
Okay. That's the real deal, right? Who is willing to give an example? Doesn't have to be you. An example of what red looks like.
Intolerant, impatient, mean.
Yeah. What else?
Being depressed on Thursday about Monday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's good. What else?
being really removed. Like, I notice if I'm really stressed out, I will not be focusing on what people are saying to me and then kind of catch myself and be like, oh wait, I gotta listen.
Yeah, not present. I mean, I'm really, really vulnerable. And hopefully I'm not alone in this. When I'm in this space, I am looking for why it's my client's own fault. Because I feel like if I can like blame whatever the situation is on them, then I don't have to engage in the same way. And that scares the
out of me when I get in that moment. I just catch it real quick, but I'm like, oh, I'm so removed and so irritated that I'm just like, well, if you hadn't, whatever, you know. And, you know, not a fun thing to admit, but I always want to be real careful about the red for that purpose. Yeah. What else? Another red, the eye twitch that starts in the yellow apparently has a whole other level that I can get to. I waited too long to go on vacation one year. We went to this gorgeous place up above San Francisco, and my eye twitched so much I call it the vacation I sort of saw, you know? Because this eye I could hardly see out of, and I couldn't get it to stop, and I was just like, I'm fun. And I'm miserable, and you know, you just get too strung out, and you're just kind of you've missed the moment for really being able to enjoy that. My back goes out when I get in the red. We usually have some sort of malady that takes over. Some people it's their stomach, you know, things like that. So this is a handy thing to keep on your desk. We have it all over Pepperdine, mostly because I wear my colleagues down. But I just want us to be aware and to keep a check on ourselves, because unfortunately not a lot of people are going to keep an eye on you. So it's on you to kind of, and also to build friendships around, like, hey, when you notice that I'm like so mean, could you maybe tap me on the shoulder? And instead of saying like, you're terrible, you're so mean, now my husband says, hey, is there something you could do for yourself? Make you nicer? In the most loving way. But I've really learned that when I'm sort of just done with giving, then I need to go and do a couple things for myself and sort of get back on track and identify like my purpose and just sort of get back toward the green. Okay. So now we get to do one more really fun thing before I send you off. The ABA National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing sets these goals for us. We want to thrive in occupational pursuits. We want to have creative and intellectual endeavors. We want to have a sense of spirituality or greater purpose in life, physical health, and social connections. So that is what they think it would look like for us to thrive. And what I've learned from my friend in social work, who has her students from the very first day put together their self-care maintenance plan. I just think it's brilliant, and I've incorporated this into my life, and so we're going to do it today because you're here with me. And that is to think of ourselves as 4 quadrants. A lot of times we think of ourselves maybe in one, or we take care of ourselves in one way. So a lot of times people say, oh, I handle my stress, I run. That's awesome, but you have 3 other parts of you that need to be cared for as well. So we have our mind, our emotions, our body, and our spirit. And these are just examples. There's examples on the back of your card. But what I would like you to do just for a moment here is look at these and think about which quadrant you do the least in. Because then we're going to set some goals. But yeah, so look at this and sort of I think one way to look at it is where do you do the most, and then where do you sort of think, oh, I don't really do any of those things, or a few of those things. So take a sec. So maybe a way we could talk about this is, in a quadrant where you're strong, who would be willing to throw out a couple of things that they enjoy doing in that quadrant? Because I've found that in groups, it's really nice to hear what other people are doing, so it gives you an idea of what you might like to do as well. So what's something in a quadrant that you enjoy doing, what's something on this list that you like to do? You like doing nothing. Anybody like to get a massage? Sure. Anybody like to go on a walk in nature? Yeah? Anybody like to find things that make them laugh? Do you watch comedies on Netflix or, okay. There's this new show about Long Beach. Have you seen this, Mr. Iglesias? It's kind of cute. It's like, I need things that are just kind of cute. And I'm from Long Beach, so it's funny. I don't know. Express my outrage in social action letters and protests. Anybody giving to things or writing letters or calling their congressman? Have that little app that reminds them? Some people that really is an empowering thing. Anybody journal? No journal. Art? Anybody have an artistic side? Nice. Music or dance? Yeah. Meditation or prayer? Meditations? Does anybody get preventative medical care? Anybody go to the dentist when you're supposed to go to the dentist? These are important things and we don't do them. I had a friend who needed a root canal terribly. Her face is just swollen, she's a mess, and she's like, I can't go. And I was like, you're doing an expungement. I mean, I feel like it's going to be okay if it's done tomorrow. Go to the dentist. Like, let's take care of ourselves in those ways. Drinking water. Yeah. Eating, getting sleep. Anybody do a gratitude list? It's kind of a thing these days. Reading literature that doesn't have to do with your profession. Yes. With Audible, it's so great because I have a horrible commute, but I'm becoming so well read, right? Like I feel so, whatever. Learn something new. What else? Maintaining some sort of community outside of work. So these types of things. So what I'd like you to do for your own edification is that this next week, just pick something from here that you've not been trying and start to incorporate it just in some small way into your life. And especially if it's in a quadrant where you just sort of haven't been doing much in that arena of your life. And recognizing ourselves as a whole person and trying to tend to each part of ourselves is what's going to build up that resiliency, right? So that, and I remember sitting, and I'm a big proponent of therapy, so I remember sitting with my therapist and saying, well, I do all these things now and my work is still kicking my butt. And she's like, yeah. It's not that it just stops. It's that you can bounce back more quickly. And that's what I want for you, is that the work you've chosen is hard work. I don't know if there's harder. Like, I think this is the hardest thing you can do as a lawyer. But that we would bounce back and that we would arrive in this building ready to be helpful. And so that we would sort of be in the space for that. So that is our project for the next week. Any questions? Oh, thank you. The last thing on your notes, there's some apps for you to look at. There's Headspace is online meditation. Talkspace is therapy online. Lawyers Assistance Program. Oh, and the Sierra Club has hiking groups, so you could just join up on a Saturday and go be in nature. So, all right, y'all, take care.